Welcome back. Both New York and New Jersey, they're considering whether or not to legalize recreational marijuana. By the way, Massachusetts and D.C., they've already made it legal. Now, in New York, both Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, they're firmly behind it. And across the river in New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, he's behind full legalization and a measure that would do just that. And I say just, got out of committee. Now, the issue, it was the focus of a recent hearing in Trenton, and we heard from people on each side of the debate. Take a listen for yourself.
To me, the most important aspect of legalizing marijuana in New Jersey is getting rid of drug dealers. Marijuana is still the cash cow of the illegal drug trade.
My friends, I know right now you're in a financial budget crisis, and I suspect that the reason this hearing is in the Budget Committee as opposed to the Public Health Committee where it ought to be is because what you're really after today is a quick financial fix. But as a former addict myself, I can tell you quick fixes don't work.
All right, so here to walk us through what is happening in each respective state, Ed Forbes, Senior Director of Local News at The Record, and David Robinson, an investigative reporter covering health for the Journal News. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's funny, the momentum has switched, Ed. If somebody told me 6 months ago that New York might get to legalization before New Jersey, I would have called them crazy.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating.
But what gives in Jersey? I thought this thing was going to sail right through, then all of a sudden it hit a hiccup in Trenton.
Trenton is a very interesting town to cover this year. Phil Murphy rode into office with support, we thought, from both houses of the legislature. Both the Assembly and Senate down in Trenton are controlled by Democrats. He said in his spring budget speech that he wanted to make legalization a priority by January 1st. And on Monday, the legislators left Trenton for the last time in 2018. Three bills have made it out of committee in both houses, and we presume that the legislation will bubble up again early in the next session, but there's no timetable, and of course Murphy's got a handful of other priorities and problems to be dealing with as well. Minimum wage is a big issue for Murphy. I think that's a priority, and he seems to be closer to accord with Senate President Steve Sweeney and Assembly's Speaker Craig Coughlin on that. But he's also been dogged by the Katie Brennan scandal, by the poor handling of the snowstorm, and other small issues. It has not been a cakewalk for this Goldman Sachs executive in his first year as governor in Trenton.
I'll get into some more of the whys on the legalization, but David, all of a sudden, Governor Cuomo, which was among the last converts even on medicinal marijuana, now says, let's legalize it, and by the way, let's get there in a hurry. I'm talking in a few months here. I want to see this thing happen. Why the sudden change of heart here in Albany?
Yeah, for Cuomo, I mean, the turnaround has been stark, especially somebody who tends to move at his own speed sometimes, especially for subjects and issues that he doesn't really put as a priority. And he long held this, as early as a year ago, calling marijuana a gateway drug, and having to be dragged all the way into the medical marijuana legalization. And for him to turn around like this, there's a lot of reporting that we've done around kind of a lot of the lobbying dollars that were floating around. New York being such a giant marketplace for potentially for recreational marijuana, there was a lot of there was millions of dollars flowing in from places like California, Colorado, some of the big cannabis industry leaders saying, the reform it's not an if, it's a when issue, and who we have to focus on is Cuomo. And smartly, as one of the legislators in the New Jersey piece put out there, they also focused on the health department. They specifically went to the regulators who were going to be involved in writing these rules, and really, I think they had the foresight to say New York was going to lean on its health department to give that stamp of approval, to give Cuomo the political leverage he needed to reverse his position from this long-held opposition to it. And he really made the case that a lot of the public health advocates and a lot of the medical societies are putting out there now that there's a health risk that hasn't been discussed where a lot of these other states are out there.
But would you say, David, his change of heart is more about the political calendar in 2020, or is it more about the money that New York could certainly love to do? It's one of these syntaxes, if you will, that you don't have to cut something to get. All of a sudden you get a windfall of money. Casinos have always been, and lottery. Those are the kind of things that this would come under, albeit with different social concerns.
I think a combination of both. I think he came to the realization of the political realities of it. I mean, when you say, when they make the argument that New Jersey's was fast moving and we're going to be across the way, Canada's already legalized and New York has its shared border with Canada also. So I think he saw the writing on the wall of that. But I think he felt the pressure from his left, from the progressive movement, some of the challenges. They're quick to point out that they already had their study in place before the primary challenge from Cynthia Nixon. I think that's the last thing that any of the people in the Cuomo camp want to hear, is that this was something that was prompted by Cynthia Nixon and her calls during the primary challenge.
Ed, for me, I got to tell you, there was a pretty powerful soundbite that former Congressman Kennedy had to say as to, hey, why are we in the Budget Committee? And by the way, as a former addict talking about a quick fix here, it never works. Is that some of the holdup here? Is it really still the whole social debate as to whether or not the state should be in the business of monetizing people using drugs, even if it's marijuana? Is there still that debate, or is it about something else?
I think that debate has definitely been part of the tenor of discussion in Trenton this year. We spent some time with Senate President Sweeney and in November, and he shared with us that he felt that people in his own caucus, people across the legislature in different parts of New Jersey were still concerned with decriminalization issues. They're still concerned with the idea of marijuana being a gateway drug.
Do you think it's generational? Like, for example, when we talk about states that struggled with this, we want to get behind same-sex marriage. Well, now it seems like, you know, a crazy conversation from that long ago. But it wasn't that long ago. It was generational. You go to people under 30, they didn't understand what the whole fuss was about. You go to a different generation, you did. Is it the same thing here?
I think there's certainly some of that. We've spoken to law enforcement people who are on both sides of this issue. Some of it is, of course, generational. But really, as Dave sort of suggested, this is a race for revenue.
David, to that end, unlike casinos where they're fighting over the same gambler maybe, theoretically, different states could still generate a lot of revenue from their respective citizens with these dispensaries from marijuana. Does New York have any idea how much money it would really make at the end of the day?
Well, they put out figures already. I think the figure that they threw out in the report was $437 million was roughly what they put out for their tax revenue. And I think, you know, if their medical marijuana program is any example, I think they probably bet on the high end there. I mean, they put out tens of millions of dollars for medical marijuana revenue, and they had a handful of patients for the first, for the foreseeable first few months into the year, really, and they're just starting to get some of those revenues starting to turn up. So it's going to take time to build up those types of numbers they're talking about. So, I mean, when they're saying it's going to be a revenue fix, you know, it's not necessarily where the race comes in at that end. It's going to be something that's years out. I mean, to get the infrastructure in place, you look at Massachusetts, you look at some of the states that already legalized, and it's a challenge to really go through the logistics of actually opening up dispensaries, meeting the potential demand there to meet those numbers that they're projecting. I mean, sure, the demand's there. When you look at the black market numbers, there are plenty of people who are using marijuana, and those numbers are really high. But when you start translating that to a taxable, regulated product, that's something that could take time.
Well, I know you guys, obviously, both Gannett Properties are going to be following very closely what's going on in both Trenton and Albany, respectively. Thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Now, when we come back, we're actually going to be talking about the development with Justice Ginsburg. It's a health scare today. We'll catch up on the very latest. We'll be right back.